Were you a predator?
I had obviously become one, yes.
Now, a veteran FBI profiler goes one-on-one with Rhodes and enters his lethal mind.
Every interview is a different opportunity, and I treat every interview as very special and very unique. My role is to bring out information on these crimes so we can all learn from him.
Mary Ellen O'Toole is a criminal profiler who worked in the FBI's famed behavioral analysis unit for more than a decade.
The purpose of working in this unit was to study violent crime and the kinds of people who commit these crimes, all in an effort to assist law enforcement throughout the world to identify these offenders, to interview them, and to successfully prosecute them. My specialty was working with violent offenders, serial killers, psychopaths. I worked on the Unabomber case. I worked on the J.C. Dugard case. I've worked on Gary Ridgway, the Green River murder case.
Now she delves into the mind of James Dusty Rhodes, who is serving 4 consecutive life sentences for murder, attempted murder, kidnapping, and sexual battery.
At the time that Dusty was out and walking the streets, he was extremely dangerous. He was lethal. He was absolutely lethal. On a scale of 1 to 5, you definitely have to put Dusty at a 5.
I'm military trained. If I want to hurt you, I can do this in a matter of seconds.
The look that he gave me was actually chilling. When you hear the term, the hair goes up on the back of your neck, it went up on the back of my neck.
A person should be able to feel safe to do as they please. But the reality is, everywhere you go, there is somebody out there. I think that most people who become victims because they are not aware of just how easy they are or vulnerable they are to attack. They feel comfortable in their environment, and they should, but that's not the reality of our world. And I preach that to my own daughters. There are people out there at all times who are a threat to you, whether you see them or not. And unfortunately, at one time, I was one of those people.
In this case, I looked at who were the victims that he was selecting and what was that selection process. The more you understand the victim, the more you'll understand about the offender.
All of Rhodes' victims are strangers to him, selected randomly when the urge strikes.
These did appear to be victims of opportunity. In the case of Dusty, he begins to act out on unwilling victims, people that he actually kidnapped off the street and then acted out on with his sexual fantasies.
I knew she couldn't overpower me, obviously, which in all rapes, that's pretty much the case.
O'Toole believes Rhodes is guilty of other crimes that he's never been charged with.
In a career that started so young and had so many years to evolve, it would be unrealistic for us to think we had all of them.
She hopes to extract his secrets.
So, do we know everything about your criminal behavior?
Have I done things that I shouldn't do? Yes.
James Dusty Rhodes is a 23-year-old drifter working in construction when he commits his first rape and murder in Colorado. He doesn't look the part. He's married with an infant daughter and another baby on the way. But lurking underneath his family man facade is a violent sexual predator.
He just looked very normal, very typical, and he acknowledged that. He said, yes, I did look very normal, and that really enabled him to carry out the crimes that he committed.
During my normal hours, when I was working and raising my family and all that, for most of the time I was rather normal. And people would look at me and all they saw was another husband, another father, another guy who worked for a living.
Let me ask you this. After you would commit an attack, then you would go home to your wife and your children, and you had young children at home. Mm-hmm. What was that transition like?
Well, because all of these happened at night, when I got home, they were generally except for in one case, asleep. And I would sneak in. They had no clue. I would sneak in, realizing after the fact that I'm covered in blood in 2 cases, and I need to hide what I'm doing or I'm going to have issues here.
His sadistic spree of attacks begins on a snowy night in Colorado Springs on December 7th, 1982. Rhodes is in his car in a shopping mall parking lot, waiting for his wife to get off work.
I'm there to pick up my wife. I've been drinking all day again. I've been at a strip joint all day again. And I've had sex on my mind all day again. My wife's not there. And then I see another woman walk out from a store directly in front of where my wife works at. It's snowing real hard. And she walks between her car and mine. And she comes around her car to scrape snow off the windows. She's got her back to me, my door's this far from her. I snapped. I opened the door, I grabbed her, and I pulled her in. When I pulled her in, she had hit her head on the door frame. And it was a pretty loud knock. But then I pulled her over to counsel and put her in the seat. I then shut the door and I proceeded to drive away.
Rhodes drives to a cemetery and gets the woman out of the car at knife point.
You sexually assaulted her.
Right, eventually that's what happened.
And she...
The knife somehow came out of my pocket. It's now in her possession. And that's when I snapped. She gives me the knife. She holds the knife up. I took it from her. She didn't give it to me.
You took the knife from her?
I took the knife. She held it up and said, "Here's your knife."
He wants to imply that she hands that knife back to him, which I seriously doubt.
And I snatched it from her and immediately, from that very second, started stabbing her.
The woman is stabbed 15 times.
And he leaves her to die, and she does, in fact, die from her injuries. Her body's not found for...
About a month.
About a month.
And then I would find out years later when I'm arrested that she didn't die from the stab wounds. She died from the fractured skull. And that's when I remember that her head had hit the car.
He's relieved, however, to find out, which is really interesting, that she died not from the stab injuries, but from the trauma to her head. No, you grabbed her, you caused her to bump her head, and then you stabbed her multiple times. So it was his reluctance to want to take ownership of that case that I thought was really interesting.
The victim lies in the cold snow for 28 days before she is found and identified as 23-year-old Cynthia McLuhan, a young mother who leaves behind a 5-year-old girl. By then, Rhodes has made a clean getaway, skipping town with his wife and daughter, telling them it's time to move to find a new job. The cold-blooded nature of the murder has all the hallmarks of being the work of a psychopath.
There's a profound lack of empathy and remorse for victims. If the offender is a psychopath, that means that they can put it behind them. He leaves Colorado and continues the assaults as he ultimately ends up in Florida.
The fatal assault is just the beginning. Rhodes is about to start a string of perverted attacks on unsuspecting women.
Were you a predator?
I had obviously become one, yes.
James Dusty Rhodes rapes and kills Cynthia McLuhan in a Colorado cemetery in December 1982. He quickly leaves town with his wife and infant daughter, eventually settling in St. Petersburg, Florida in 1984, where he begins a series of attacks and sexual assaults.
I'm frustrated, and my drug of choice at the time was sex. It became a drug to me. And I decided, to be blunt with you, that I'm going to have sex. I'm going to have it right now.
By day, Rhodes is a construction worker and family man, and soon his wife gives birth to their second daughter. But at night, he walks the streets of the beachside party town looking for victims.
Sometimes he would follow women just to see them get afraid and not do anything, or sometimes he'd just stare at women to see if he could make them nervous, just to watch their nervous reaction.
Detective Paula Zietzelberger works in the St. Petersburg Police Department's sex crimes unit during Rhodes's crime spree. She doesn't know it yet, but the case is about to consume her life.
When the impulse would strike him and the opportunity was there, he would act.
I'm looking at every female that I found attractive.
Mary Ellen O'Toole is searching for the root causes of his violent sexual cravings.
My wife and I were sexually active almost every single night for 5 years.
With these kinds of crimes, there's never just one motive. There are multiple motives. His focus was to make sure that the victim understood that he was absolutely in control. You're following women and then targeting them. It really sounds very predatory. Do you know what I mean when I say the word predatory? Would you agree with that?
Yes. A lion's a little bit hungry, but he's not really on the hunt yet. But all of a sudden he sees a meal. And that's the same thing. That's what a predator does. A predator sees the opportunity and takes it, and that makes you a predator.
His first victim in Florida is sleeping in her apartment when Rhodes breaks in the middle of the night.
I saw a woman, I thought, through a window, and I opened the screen and I went upstairs. She was laying down sleeping. And I pulled out a knife and I woke her up. She went to try to scream, I think, and I covered her mouth.
What is the expression on her face when she realizes there's a strange man standing in her bedroom?
She's terrified, as anybody should be.
How can you tell that she's
she looked like what you would see in a movie, and somebody goes boo around a corner with a knife in her hand, and you know, that's not something you're supposed to see when you're sleeping in your own home. She started to cry, I believe. Then she started to beg.
That focus on the victim's reaction seemed to be an important element for him, like the surprise, I gotcha. And that came up in subsequent explanations on other cases. And what were you doing at the time?
At the time, I was getting on top of her and raping her.
And what were you feeling at the time?
Frustration, anger, rage. I was mad at myself.
So you're saying that at the same time, simultaneous with the sexual assault, you were angry?
I was angry with myself in an attempt to try to find pleasure in something that I, somewhere deep inside, obviously knew that there's no pleasure in, because there is none. I mean, how can you have pleasure in terrifying somebody?
He explained that he was very angry at the time and he was full of rage, but at the same time, he was able to get an erection and ejaculate. So he was describing two heightened sense of arousal at the same time, and we know that's not possible. This woman was a stranger to you, correct?
Totally.
The terror that you think she was experiencing, did that add to your sexual excitement?
No, I don't think so. I think it took away from it, which is what made me want to leave.
But you wanted to leave after you completed the sexual assault?
Yes, that's true. See, and that's a twisted way of looking at my own thoughts. My thoughts are over here, over here, over here while I'm doing it. I can't make up my mind.
He said that he was thinking at the time about feeling kind of sad about what he was doing, upset about what he was doing, but he was able to complete the sexual assault. Again, doesn't make any sense. I think he didn't want to be seen as a sexual deviant.
After the sexual assault, Rhodes leaves the apartment. Once again, he returns home to his wife and two daughters and conceals his crime.
Once the sexual assault was completed, you left the residence. Did you take anything with you?
No.
Did you go back to your
I
home?
went directly to my house and hid. I would go home, clean myself up as quick as I could, and just clam up and stay in home as long as I could.
The victim reports the rape to the police, but even with a description, Rhodes blends in so well he's not an obvious suspect.
The most chilling is actually James Rhodes, if you were to meet him, would seem like just the normal guy, everyday guy, the guy next door, a guy you could like. But inside him, there is danger. It's scary what's in there.
Rhodes is soon back on the streets, looking for more targets.
Sex and violence come together in one's development. It's not that at 15 or 20 years of age, someone snaps and decides that rape is sexually gratifying. It's an evolutionary process, and it starts at a very early age. And if there is the presence of traits of psychopathy, that could be genetic. But you also have nature-nurture. What kind of an environment is the individual raised in? How are they treated physically, emotionally, and mentally?
Life for Rhodes is difficult from the start. When he is 1.5 years old, his biological father is sent to prison for auto theft. His mother remarries an army man, and Rhodes and his siblings are constantly on the move. Rhodes says he is physically abused by his stepfather and emotionally abused by a mother who didn't love him. But he singles out his relationship with his mother as being particularly hostile, fueling a lifelong anger towards women.
I got upset with my mother for years. I know what it was like to be sad, to be put down, to be harmed, to be hurt, in some cases injured. And nobody likes to be hurt.
Although she admits to yelling, his mother says she is a loving parent who never abuses him and never even suspects that his stepfather does. Rhodes leaves home as a teenager and starts working in bars and strip clubs. He says he's arrested as a juvenile for fighting, loitering, and grand theft auto. But the charges are dropped. Eventually, he is placed in a group home. He marries at 19 after serving time in prison for armed robbery. By the time Rhodes is living in St. Petersburg at age 24, his anger towards women takes over his life. He's evolved into a violent sexual predator.
I wasn't conscious of how this is affecting anybody while I'm doing it. That's the scary part.
During the summer of 1984, the Sunshine City of St. Petersburg, Florida, becomes the hunting ground for a violent rapist and killer named James Dusty Rhodes, who lives in town with his wife and 2 children.
Once a person makes themselves isolated, they become prey.
Rhodes moves to St. Petersburg after raping and killing a woman in Colorado. A month after he gets to town, he rapes a woman at knife point. Police don't know it yet, but Rhodes is just getting started.
We're dealing with a very, very disturbed person.
I didn't waste any time with a ruse. I didn't care to have a ruse. I chose the force route.
Because?
Because I was on a mission that I felt like force was adequate.
Being a predator means that you're going out in a mindset. It's being able to watch when somebody doesn't know, and that can be very sexually gratifying. It's the ability to get into somebody's home or get into their car and feel that power over them. They never saw it coming, so you're generating that fear that you need.
Rhodes keeps up his double life. After the attacks, he always goes straight home and resumes his role as a husband, father, and construction worker.
How did you behave around your wife?
She was asleep, the kids were asleep. I'd come in. Nothing seemed abnormal to her because I would come home late frequently. I'd clean up, I'd go to bed.
It's easy to move from one life to another because he doesn't think about the victim. So it's not eating at him. It is not really concerning him.
A month after his first attack in Florida, he strikes again. Rhodes finds his 3rd victim walking alone on a dark street.
Had you ever seen her before?
No, I never at all. She just happened to be walking down the street. Again, an opportunistic moment. Here's a person who's isolated herself, and then at that very point, I've made the decision that I'm going to strike again.
He was a very, very dangerous person. He was out there pretty much doing whatever he wanted. What was your intention when you first saw her?
The intention was rape. I grabbed her by the arm, and she began to fight. She began to scream. And when she began to do all that, I went from anger to outright rage, and I began to strike her with a knife.
You stabbed her and grabbed her purse and ran. But there's no attempt at sexual assault. Why?
Because two people were screaming at me from a window. There's witnesses now. And so I abandoned everything and ran. The reason she got assaulted with a knife is she became aggressive. She tried to fight rather than flee. That's a huge mistake when you got a guy twice your size holding a knife. She should have fled. Screaming was smart, fleeing is smart, but for a woman to try to fight a man is not going to work. It's not going to happen.
What he was looking for in these attacks is fear, terror. And I think because he was not getting that, he got angry. And when he got angry, he was going to punish that victim. And he stabbed him repeatedly and left them to die.
But the woman is brought to the hospital and survives. Detective Paula Zietzelberger is working in the sex crimes unit when the call comes in.
She had been stabbed, I think it was 17 or more times. Her purse had been taken, but that was much more violence than needed to steal a woman's purse.
The failure to sexually assault the woman leaves Rhodes frustrated. But he isn't finished. Before police can find him, Rhodes is back on the prowl, searching for another victim.
I was mad that I had to run. I was mad that I didn't succeed. There was a lot of anger there. And so I went right back into predator mode.
You sound really mission-oriented to me to complete a sexual assault. Someone's going to get it.
That was the mission that didn't get completed.
Not for long.
I was on a mission, and the mission wasn't complete.
He liked that term, that he was a predator who was mission-oriented. It fit for him. He was in charge. He was the one that was out watching and following, and the victims didn't know it. It was actually pretty chilling to watch that. When was the mission accomplished in your mind?
The point was to have sex.
Less than an hour later, Rhodes finds a woman walking alone to her car in a parking lot.
Opportunity to accomplish what I set out to do 15 minutes earlier was there. I'm in predator mode. I'm now looking for a victim.
Predator mode means you're focused.
I'm focused. I'm on a mission. Now she's isolated herself, and there's the predator. Here comes the lion. The lion has found the cub that's off by itself.
Okay.
And that's what a predator does. I mean, it's sad, but that's the truth. That's what happens. The opportunity is there.
It's dark, quiet. The woman vulnerable. Rhodes approaches as she gets into her car.
By pulling her car door open, she's trapped herself. Her door's open. I'm coming up behind her. There's nowhere for her to go except for into the car. And that's when she tried to dive into the car, I think. Or halfway diving and halfway getting pushed.
Rhodes forces the woman into the passenger seat.
What was the reaction that you got from her?
Fear. Of all of them, she was the quietest. She cowered up into the corner of the other seat.
The next thing she knows, she has a knife at her throat. And he told her not to try anything cute, or I'll cut you.
What were you telling her to do?
At first, remain seated and be quiet. And then that's when I had her perform fellatio on me.
My sense is, as I'm listening to this as a behavioralist, is that a part of what was turning you on was you've got women who are terrified, and you were excited by their being so frightened.
I may have gotten that in my subconscious, but I don't recall ever having any pleasure at all from the fact that somebody else was terrified of me.
You do remember their expressions, though, which is interesting.
The woman reports the sexual assault to Detective Zietzelberger, who is taken aback by the disturbing details of the encounter.
Afterwards, he told her to take off her bra. She did, and he had lifted her blouse with the knife, and he started using the knife and was tracing circles on her breast, and she said, "You promised you wouldn't hurt me." And he said, "I'm not going to hurt you."
With 3 attacks reported, 2 in the same night, Detective Zietzelberger is alarmed. She suspects a sexual predator is on the loose.
Something's going on. We have a dangerous person out there that apparently has it in for women.
No woman is safe as Rhodes searches for his next target.
The decision was made.
And who made that decision?
I made that decision. I made the decision that this was going to be another victim.
Serial rapist and killer James Dusty Rhodes has attacked 3 women in St. Petersburg, Florida, 2 in one night, stabbing one victim 17 times.
My mind was twisted as to what was normal, appropriate sexual conduct.
But really, being, frank here, none of this is really, normal behavior.
None of it is.
The police department suspects a rapist is on the hunt for women in its town. And Detective Paula Zietzelberger is on the case. She and her 2 teenage daughters live near the crime scenes.
The fact that my family, my daughters were in that area made this case very important to me, especially with this cluster of violent crimes that we started to see piling up within the month and a half that he was in St. Petersburg. You get nervous and you wonder, could it be me?
2 weeks after his previous attack, Rhodes finds a vulnerable girl in a dark spot and strikes again. His 5th victim, 17 years old, is emptying trash at an ice cream parlor where she works at 11 at night.
And I walk up behind her and I said, let's go for a jog. 5 words I wish I'd never said.
Rhodes takes her to the nearby railroad tracks. He rapes her and then unleashes a ferocious assault.
Something made him mad, and he reached in his back pocket and pulled out his knife and just started stabbing. He said he stabbed her 2 or 3 times. Actually, he stabbed her about 17 times in the back, and then rolled her over and stabbed her a few more times, and then ran off and left her on the railroad tracks for dead, left her for dead.
The victim is reported missing shortly after being abducted. Concerned that their serial rapist has struck again, police mount a massive search.
They did send out police and a helicopter and a dog started tracking down the tracks, but then turned off.
The girl's stepfather also looks for her with a flashlight. He finds her 6 hours after the attack, unconscious, bleeding, but miraculously still alive.
And he carried her to the car and took her to a nearby hospital, and she survived her wounds.
The victim is able to give a description of her assailant and tells detectives about her horrendous ordeal.
She was in and out of consciousness, and she was vaguely aware of the helicopter going over and lighting up the area. And so she attempted to pull herself up onto the railroad tracks where she could be seen.
Detective Zietzelberger is shocked by the brutality of the attack.
I would say there's a lot of rage there. A lot of rage. Over-the-top rage. The turning her over and stabbing her some more. It's almost like overkill, if you will. So everyone was at attention, and knowing we had somebody very dangerous out there.
Did you care if she died?
No, at the time, no. At the time, in all of these, in any case, it's just like when you get into a fight. You don't care if you break a guy's nose.
After the assault, Rhodes sneaks back into his apartment.
Now I have to clean this blood off before it points a finger right at me. I go into the house, I clean the knife.
But do you
That's
feel
the
a
bottom
sense
line.
of relief almost?
Relief that I got away.
Relief that the mission was accomplished?
No, I don't think that I was ever relieved that a mission was accomplished in any case, and that's why the mission had to continue. It wasn't filling the void.
The next morning, police canvass the area with their new description of the suspect. A white man in his 20s with wire-rimmed glasses. A construction foreman tells officers that one of his men, Dusty Rhodes, matches the description. Rhodes is asked to come to the police station.
And he voluntarily came in to talk to police and give his fingerprints and photograph voluntarily. That's a routine tool that we use in police work to try to develop suspects.
Police have a strong suspicion they have finally caught their man. But with no hard evidence, Rhodes isn't under arrest. He returns home to his wife. Rhodes is kept under surveillance, while Detective Zietzelberger shows his picture to one of his previous rape victims in a lineup with photos of similar-looking men.
And then she said, "Do you ever get goosebumps?" She picked up his picture and held it up, and she said, "That's him, and I've got goosebumps right now all over, remembering what happened." That was one of the best positive IDs on a photo pack I'd ever had.
Authorities now have probable cause for arrest. They raid his apartment and find Rhodes with his wife getting ready to flee.
He was telling her to get things together, we're leaving. And what's really amazing about this is his wife was a lovely young woman, and they had 2 beautiful children.
Police proceed cautiously, not knowing just whom they are arresting or what other crimes he may be responsible for.
You know what a psychopath is, right?
Yes.
Do you think you are one?
No, I think I was one.
The day after a 17-year-old girl is found raped and stabbed on the railroad tracks in St. Petersburg, Florida, James Dusty Rhodes is arrested as a suspect. While police are putting Rhodes in handcuffs, Detective Paula Zietzelberger finds the knife used in the attacks in his wife's purse.
There was this very distinctive-looking knife shining brightly at the bottom of her purse. And I realized that that was probably our weapon. It matched the description that had been given by the victims. He asked her to keep the knife in her purse. He said, "Police can't search your purse."
Rhodes's wife tells police she thinks his request to hide the knife is strange, but complies without asking any questions. She denies any knowledge of or involvement in her husband's crimes. The knife helps police tie Rhodes to his crimes, but they aren't sure how many women he's attacked. Under interrogation at the police station, Detective Zietzelberger thinks she finally has her man. She brings in Rhodes's wife to try to get him to open up.
And at one point, he looked over at his wife and he said, "What should I do?" And she said, "You need to tell the truth." After a few moments, he finally broke down and started to cry. And he said, "I need help."
Detective Zietzelberger first gets Rhodes to confess to the sexual assault he carried out in a parking lot the week before.
I said, "She has identified you in a photo lineup." And he said, "Yes, I did that."
Next, the 17-year-old girl on the railroad tracks. Rhodes thinks he's killed her.
I said, "She's going to be all right." And he just visibly, it was like his body language and his whole demeanor just let loose with relief when he realized that she hadn't died. And then he talked openly.
The list grows. After several hours of interrogation, Rhodes admits to 4 attacks in Florida over a 2-month period.
There's almost a point you reach where they give up. They almost give up. And you can see it in their body language and in their eyes and hear it in their voice.
Rhodes describes feeling invincible during the attacks.
He told me that when he was committing these crimes, he felt powerful and vulnerable. Like if someone had come up right then and there with a gun and told him to stop, he wouldn't stop.
I reached a psychotic stage every once in a while that lasted for a minute, and then that minute would result in a crime.
Psychotic means a break with reality. A psychopath is, using your terms, someone without a conscience.
At one point, I had no conscience.
This was a very successful sexual predator whose violence was such that there was little, if any, regard for the victim.
During his confession, Detective Zietzelberger gets a glimpse of the demons inside of Rhodes's head.
Almost every night, he said he'd go walking, and for some reason he'd start to get mad. He would just be thinking, start feeling mad, and sometimes he would get a headache. And this headache would come on him, and he knew he was going to do something bad.
Is there any doubt in my mind that had I not been caught, there would have been more victims? Absolutely not. There would have been more victims. I know, obviously, after 4 assaults, that I was going to continue to assault until I was caught.
Detective Zietzelberger thinks Rhodes's wife knows more about her husband's crimes than she's let on. But there is no evidence that she's connected to the crimes in any way, and no charges are ever filed.
I just find it hard to believe that there wasn't some suspicion. I mean, when you come home all bloody, now maybe she was able to sleep through all this, but I find it difficult to believe that she didn't have at least a suspicion that something was wrong.
As he prepares for trial in Florida, Rhodes is able to keep the murder he committed in Colorado a secret. But the truth about that murder and others that Mary Ellen O'Toole thinks he may have committed will soon be revealed.
Do you see how it would be very difficult to, I'm not sure how else to say it than direct, to really believe that these are the only cases you've committed?
James Dusty Rhodes pleads not guilty to attacking 4 women in St. Petersburg, Florida in 1984, despite confessing to the crimes. His first trial is for the attack against his last victim, the 17-year-old girl who was raped and stabbed 17 times. The girl survives the attack and testifies. Detective Paula Zietzelberger also testifies and is relieved to finally put an end to the crime spree that terrorized her city.
He hurt a lot of people. You can't really be sure who is going to be capable of this kind of crime, and I think that's what makes it scary, that it could be the likable person next door or the person you work with, and yet they could be capable of this kind of crime, this kind of anger, violence.
Rhodes is convicted of first-degree attempted murder, kidnapping, and sexual battery. He then changes his plea in the other crimes to guilty and is sentenced to 3 consecutive life terms. In prison, Rhodes still hides a dark secret, the murder he committed in Colorado in 1982. But a year after he gives a clue to Detective Zietzelberger, the crime is finally solved.
He did tell me about an incident when I was interviewing him that happened back in the early 80s. It was a girl that he had beaten her up badly and raped her. Said he hadn't killed her, but he did mention Colorado Springs, and eventually that information was passed out there.
The Colorado detective, focusing on cold cases, ties Rhodes to the crime. 3 years after killing Cynthia McLuhan, Rhodes confesses to the murder and is given another life sentence. He allegedly tries to exact revenge from behind prison walls.
Within a few years of the arrest, I had gotten information from prison officials that Rhodes was issuing a death threat on me. And I wasn't surprised because of how extreme the case was and the fact that he had multiple life sentences.
There may be more victims. Authorities are still looking at cold cases in Colorado, Wyoming, and several other states where Rhodes spent time before moving to Florida.
What are the other cases out there that you were never charged with?
There are no other cases out there that I was never charged with. I did what I did. I've owned what I did. I'm not proud of anything that I've done, but I have done no more.
You can understand how it's very difficult
I would understand it.
Because you have a history of assaultive behavior and residential burglaries and armed robbery, and then moving into sexual assault, and then there's a homicide.
Yes. But have I any other victims? No. Absolutely not.
Even though she is unable to extract a new confession, Mary Ellen O'Toole believes her interview with Rhodes offers important insights into the minds of violent criminals.
Dusty is a sexual predator whose crime scenes, in my opinion, manifest traits of psychopathy like impulsivity, grandiosity, a lack of guilt, a lack of remorse. Through sexual aggression, he is sexually gratified and he feels a sense of power and control and whatever else. So it's that deadly combination.
Rhodes's personal relationships deteriorate during his time in prison. His wife divorces him, and his children stop all contact. He says he is no longer the violent predator he once was, and even wants to apologize to his victims.
Really be specific in terms of what message you want to give to your victims.
For any anguish that I have caused you, for all the nightmares that I know that you've gone through, I am sorry. There is nothing that I can do to take that back, so much as I wish I could. I will hope that you have found forgiveness so that it doesn't ruin all the other aspects of your life. Because one thing I have learned is that when you let things eat at you, you start eating at everything around you. And I wouldn't want that to be occurring in your life like it did in mine, because it's just going to drive you
I don't think they'll
mad
take
at all
very
times.
well to that. I asked him repeatedly, how did you feel about the victims? And he would go off onto a tangent, and eventually it would come back to intellectualizing what he did and talking about himself.
I am sorry for everything that I've ever caused to anyone. I know from long before I attacked anyone what it's like to go to bed at night knowing that you have been victimized wrongfully by somebody else, because I've been a victim.
That's what I wanted to bring out, to see how this person is today, despite how I believe he wants you to think he is.
O'Toole concludes Rhodes still exhibits the telltale signs of being a psychopath.
Psychopathy is a personality disorder, and once your personality is in place, it's hardwired. He said, no, I'm not a psychopath today. I was years ago, and based on my research, training, and expertise, that metamorphosis is fantasy. That doesn't take place.